minus 5, minus 4, minus 3, minus 2, X minus 1. Fire.
Lights out, everybody. The creaking door.
Dimension X.
Inner Sanctum Mystery.
X minus 1.
Dark fantasy.
Hello everyone, welcome to Sci-Fi and Horror, brought to you by Dwayne Old Time Radio. Sci-Fi and Horror features some of the best programs from the golden age of radio, including X-1, Orbiter X, Dimension X, it's a lot of X's, Lights Out, Ray Bradbury, Dark Fantasy, and many, many more. Before we start today's sci-fi and horror thriller, if you enjoy what I'm doing, let me ask you to subscribe to my channel. Subscribing is 100% free, and you will receive notifications on new posts. Lastly, if you have a moment, please write a short 1 or 2 sentence review or give a rating on your preferred podcast service. A positive review or rating would help me out a lot. And now, on to the show. And again, thank you for your support. Hope you enjoy. We're going to do something new to end the month. No, we're still going to hear Ray Bradbury, as always, to end the month. But this time we're going to actually hear Ray Bradbury to end the month. I'm going to skip forward quite a few years because last month we aired an episode from 1955. Now we're going to jump forward 20 years to 1975. And I have a handful of episodes of these, so I'm going to start airing them a little bit here and there. This is titled Bradbury Reads Bradbury. Yes, Ray Bradbury is going to read some of his own stories, which sounds like fun and very entertaining. The first one is titled The Lake. The second one is titled The Smile. And the third one is titled The Foghorn. I guess he liked the word "the" a lot. These were recorded and aired in 1975. I don't have a month and day, but 1975. Bradbury Reads Bradbury. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Ray Bradbury. I've been asked to read some of my short stories to you, and I've tried to find those stories that over the years seemed most popular, those stories that more people have come up to me and said, hey, that one I like very much. This one is very special. So I've tried to make that kind of list and go back and rehearse myself. And so today I'm going to read these to you. You can follow along in the text if you want, read along with me, or just lean back in your chair and listen to what I have to say. And along the way, I'll try to tell you how I came upon these ideas and how I wrote the stories. Now we're going to start with one of my very first stories, The Lake. My short story, The Lake, goes a long way back in my memory. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I used to go down by Lake Michigan with my mother, and one day a very lovely little blonde girl went into the lake and never came out again. Well, that was a mystery to me. I didn't understand death, I didn't understand drowning, and I imagine I never forgot that incident. And I began to write short stories when I was 12 years old. I wrote 1,000 words a day for about 10 years, and most of it was pretty bad. So I wrote a lot of very poor short stories from the time I was 12 until I was 22. Because I loved writing, I loved what I was doing, and it wasn't work. I enjoyed myself, even though when I read the story the next day, it wasn't any good. But I sat at the typewriter one day when I was 22, word associating again, going back into my memories, trying to find something to write about, and I wrote down the words, The Lake. And I suddenly said to myself, I wonder what there is about the lake. Why am I doing this? What is this all about? Well, let's put me down by the shore and see what happens. 2 hours later, I was seated at the typewriter, weeping, tears rolling down my cheeks. And I realized I'd turned the corner into becoming a writer. I'd written the first short story that was really good. After 10 years, 1,000 words a day of writing, I finished The Lake. And here it is. The waves shut me off from the world, from the birds in the sky, the children on the beach, my mother on the shore. There was a moment of green silence. Then the wave gave me back to the sky, the sand, the children yelling. I came out of the lake and the world was waiting for me, having hardly moved since I went away. I ran up on the beach. Mama swabbed me with a furry towel. "Stand there and dry," she said. I stood there watching the sun take away the water beads on my arms. I replaced them with goose pimples. "My, there's a wind," said Mama. "Put on your sweater." "Wait till I watch my goosebumps," I said. "Harold," said Mama. I put the sweater on and watched the waves come up and fall down on the beach, but not clumsily, on purpose with a green sort of elegance. Even a drunken man could not collapse with such elegance as those waves. It was September, in the last days when things are getting sad for no reason. The beach was so long and lonely with only about 6 people on it. The kids quit bouncing the ball because somehow the wind made them sad too, whistling the way it did, and the kids sat down and felt autumn come along the endless shore. All of the hot dog stands were boarded up with strips of golden planking, sealing in all the mustard, onion, meat odors of the long, joyful summer. It was like nailing summer into a series of coffins. One by one, the places slammed their covers down, padlocked their doors, and the wind came and touched the sand, blowing away all the million footprints of July and August. It got so that now in September there was nothing but the mark of my rubber tennis shoes and Donald and DeLoss Arnold's feet down by the water curve. Sand blew up in curtains on the sidewalks, and the merry-go-round was hidden with canvas, all of the horses frozen in midair on their brass poles, showing teeth, galloping on, with only the wind for music slipping through canvas. I stood there. Everyone else was in school. I was not. Tomorrow I would be on my way west across the United States on a train. Mum and I had come to the beach for one last brief moment. There was something about the loneliness that made me want to get away by myself. "Mama, I want to run up the beach a ways," I said. "All right, but hurry back and don't go near the water." I ran. Sand spun under me and the wind lifted me. You know how it is running, arms out so you feel veils from your fingers caused by wind, like wings. Mama withdrew into the distance, sitting. Soon she was only a brown speck, and I was all alone. Being alone is a newness to a 12-year-old child. He is so used to people about. The only way he can be alone is in his mind. There's so many real people around telling children what and how to do that a boy has to run off down a beach, even if it's only in his head, to get by himself in his own world. So now I was really alone. I went down to the water and let it cool up to my stomach. Always before, with the crowd, I hadn't dared to look, to come to this spot and search around in the water and call a certain name. But now, water is like a magician, sawing you in half. It feels as if you were cut in two, part of you, the lower part, sugar, melting, dissolving away. Cool water, and once in a while a very elegantly stumbling wave that fell with a flourish of lace. I called her name. 12 times I called it. "Tally! Tally! Oh, Tally!" You really expect answers to your calling when you are young. You feel that whatever you may think can be real, and sometimes maybe that is not so wrong. I thought of Tally swimming out into the water last May with her pigtails trailing, blonde. She went laughing, and the sun was on her small 12-year-old shoulders. I thought of the water settling quiet, of the lifeguard leaping into it, of Tally's mother screaming, and of how Tally never came out. The lifeguard tried to persuade her to come out, but she did not. He came back with only bits of waterweed in his big-knuckled fingers, and Tally was gone. She would not sit across from me at school any longer, or chase indoor balls on the brick streets on summer nights. She had gone too far out, and the lake would not let her return. And now in the lonely autumn, when the sky was huge and the water was huge and the beach was so very long, I had come down for the last time alone. I called her name again and again, Tally! Oh, Tally! The wind blew so very softly over my ears, the way wind blows over the mouths of seashells to set them whispering. The water rose, embracing my chest, then my knees, up and down, one way and another, sucking under my heels. Tally! Come back! Tally! I was only 12, but I know how much I loved her. It was that love that comes before all significance of body and morals. It was that love that is no more bad than wind and sea and sand lying side by side forever. It was made of all the warm, long days together at the beach and the humming, quiet days of droning education at the school, all the long autumn days of the years past when I had carried her books home from school. Tally! I called her name for the last time. I shivered. I felt water on my face and did not know how it got there. The waves had not splashed that high. Turning, I retreated to the sand and stood there for half an hour, hoping for one glimpse, one sign, one little bit of Tally to remember. Then I knelt and built a sandcastle, shaping it fine, building it as Tally and I had often built so many of them. But this time I only built half of it. Then I got up. Tally, if you hear me, come in and build the rest. I walked off toward that faraway speck that was Mama. The water came in, blended the sandcastle circle by circle, mashing it down little by little into the original smoothness. Silently I walked along the shore. Far away a merry-go-round jangled, but it was only the wind. The next day I went away on the train. A train has a poor memory. It soon puts all behind it. It forgets the cornlands of Illinois, the rivers of childhood, the bridges, the lakes, the valleys, the cottages, the hurts, and the joys. It spreads them out behind, and they drop back of a horizon. I lengthened my bones, put flesh on them, changed my young mind for an older one, threw away clothes as they no longer fitted, shifted from grammar to high school to college, and then there was a young woman in Sacramento. I knew her for a time, and we were married. By the time I was 22, I had almost forgotten what the East was like. Margaret suggested that our delayed honeymoon be taken back in that direction. Like a memory, a train works both ways. A train can bring rushing back all those things you left behind so many years before. Lake Bluff, population 10,000, came up over the sky. Margaret looked so handsome in her fine new clothes. She watched me as I felt my old world gather me back into its living. She held my arm as the train slid into Bluff Station, and our baggage was escorted out. So many years, and the things they do to people's faces and bodies. When we walked through the town together, I saw no one I recognized. There were faces with echoes in them, echoes of hikes on ravine trails, faces with small laughter in them from closed grammar schools and swinging on metal-linked swings and going up and down on teeter-totters, but I didn't speak. I walked and looked and filled up inside with all those memories like leaves stacked for autumn burning. We stayed on 2 weeks in all, revisiting all the places together. The days were happy. I thought I loved Margaret well. At least I thought I did. It was on one of those last days that we walked down by the shore. It was not quite as late in the year as that day so many years before, but the first evidences of desertion were coming upon the beach. People were thinning out. Several of the hot dog stands had been shuttered and nailed, and the wind, as always, waited there to sing for us. I almost saw Mama sitting on the sand as she used to sit. I had that feeling again of wanting to be alone, but I could not force myself to speak of this to Margaret. I only held on to her and waited. It got late in the day. Most of the children had gone home, and only a few men and women remained basking in the windy sun. The lifeguard boat pulled up on the shore. The lifeguard stepped out of it slowly with something in his arms. I froze there. I held my breath, and I felt small, only 12 years old, very little, very infinitesimal, and afraid. The wind howled. I could not see Margaret. I could see only the beach, the lifeguard slowly emerging from the boat with a gray sack in his hands, not very heavy, and his face almost as gray and lined. "Stay here, Margaret," I said. I don't know why I said it. But why? Just stay here, that's all. I walked slowly down the sand to where the lifeguard stood. He looked at me. "What is it?" I asked. The lifeguard kept looking at me for a long time, and he couldn't speak. He put the gray sack on the sand, and water whispered wet up around it and went back. "What is it?" I insisted. "Strange. said the lifeguard quietly. I waited. Strange, he said softly. Strangest thing I ever saw. She's been dead a long time. I repeated his words. He nodded. 10 years, I'd say. There haven't been any children drowned here this year. There were 12 children drowned here since 1933, but we found all of them before a few hours had passed. All except one, I remember. This body here, why, it must be 10 years in the water. It's not pleasant. I stared at the gray sack in his arms. Open it, I said. I don't know why I said it. The wind was louder. He fumbled with the sack. Hurry, man! Open it! I cried. I'd better not do that, he said. Then perhaps he saw the way my face must have looked. She was such a little girl. He opened it only part way. That was enough. The beach was deserted. There was only the sky and the wind and the water, and the autumn coming on lonely. I looked down at her there. I said something over and over, a name. The lifeguard looked at me. Where did you find her? I asked. Down the beach that way, in the shallow water. It's a long, long time for her, isn't it? I shook my head. Yes, it is. Oh, God, yes, it is. I thought, people grow. I have grown. But she has not changed. She is still small. She is still young. Death does not permit growth or change. She still has golden hair. She will be forever young, and I will love her forever. Oh, God, I will love her forever. The lifeguard tied up the sack again. Down the beach, a few moments later, I walked by myself. I stopped and looked down at something. This is where the lifeguard found her, I said to myself. There at the water's edge lay a sand castle, only half built. Just like Tally and I used to build them, she half and I half. I looked at it. I knelt beside the sand castle and saw the small prints of feet coming in from the lake and going back out to the lake again and not returning. Then I knew. I'll help you finish it, I said. I did. I built the rest of it up very slowly. And then I arose and turned away and walked off so as not to watch it crumble in the waves, as all things crumble. I walked back up the beach to where a strange woman named Margaret was waiting for me, smiling. The smile is one of those stories that generated itself at a secret level in my mind without my knowing it was there. I imagine it was caused by my seeing the film Pinocchio, the Walt Disney film, when I was around 20 years old. There's a scene in that film where these evil children are sort of running around a fun park destroying things and throwing tomatoes, I believe, at the Mona Lisa picture. And I saw the film and forgot all about it. And maybe 12 or 14 years later, I wrote this story, The Smile, trying to imagine a world of the future where violence is constant and where the destruction of beautiful things occurs every day. And a couple of years later, I went back and saw Pinocchio again and was astounded to see in the middle of the film there's one little image of the Mona Lisa there. And I was really amazed that my secret mind had held that image and many years later thrown it back at me. So again, it simply proves that from the strangest places, the strangest causes, an image in a film seen at a distance, you then summon back at a later time the kind of material you need for a short story. So here it is, The Smile. In the town square, the queue had formed at 5 in the morning, while cocks were crowing far out in the rhymed country, and there were no fires. All about among the ruined buildings, bits of mist had clung at first, but now with the new light of 7 o'clock it was beginning to disperse. Down the road, in twos and threes, more people were gathering in for the day of marketing, the day of festival. The small boy stood immediately behind two men who had been talking loudly in the clear air, and all of the sounds they made seemed twice as loud because of the cold. The small boy stomped his feet and blew on his red, chapped hands and looked up at the soiled, gunny-sack clothing of the men and down the long line of men and women ahead. "Here, boy, what are you doing out so early?" said the man behind him. "Got my place in line, I have," said the boy. "Why don't you run off? Give your place to someone who appreciates." "Leave the boy alone," said the man ahead, suddenly turning. "I was joking." The man behind put his hand on the boy's head. The boy shook it away coldly. "I just thought it strange, a boy out of bed so early. This boy's an appreciator of arts, I'll have you know," said the boy's defender, a man named Grigsby. "What's your name, lad?" "Tom." "Tom here is going to spit clean and true. Right, Tom?" "I sure am." Laughter passed down the line. A man was selling cracked cups of hot coffee up ahead. Tom looked and saw the little hot fire and the brew bubbling in a rusty pan. It wasn't really coffee. It was made from some berry that grew on the meadowlands beyond town, and it sold a penny a cup to warm their stomachs. But not many were buying. Not many had the wealth. Tom stared ahead to the place where the line ended, beyond a bombed-out stone wall. "They say she smiles," said the boy. "Aye, she does," said Grigsby. "They say she's made of oil and canvas." "True, and that's what makes me think she's not the original one. The original, now, I've heard, was painted on wood a long time ago." "They say she's 4 centuries old, maybe more. No one knows what year this is, to be sure." "It's 2061. That's what they say, boy, yes." "Liars." "Could be 3,000 or 5,000 for all we know. Things were in a fearful mess there for a while. All we got now is bits and pieces." They shuffled along the cold stones of the street. "How much longer before we see her?" asked Tom uneasily. "Just a few more minutes. They got her set up with 4 brass poles and velvet rope, all fancy to keep folks back. Now mind, no rocks, Tom. They don't allow rocks thrown at her." "Yes, sir." The sun rose higher in the heavens, bringing heat which made the men shed their grimy coats and greasy hats. "Why are we all here in line?" asked Tom at last. "Why are we all here to spit?" Grigsby did not glance down at him, but judged the sun. "Well, Tom, there's lots of reasons." He reached absently for a pocket that was long gone, for a cigarette that wasn't there. Tom had seen the gesture a million times. "Tom, it has to do with hate. Hate for everything in the past. I ask you, Tom, how did we get in such a state? Cities all junk, roads like jigsaws from bombs, and half the cornfields glowing with radioactivity at night. Ain't that a lousy stew? I ask you." "Yes, sir, I guess so." "It's this way, Tom. You hate whatever it was that got you all knocked down and ruined. That's human nature. Unthinking, maybe, but human nature anyway." "There's hardly nobody or nothing we don't hate," said Tom. "Right. The whole bloomin' caboodle of them people in the past who run the world. So here we are on a Thursday morning with our guts plastered to our spines, cold, live in caves and such. Don't smoke, don't drink, don't nothing except have our festivals, Tom, our festivals." And Tom thought of the festivals in the past few years. The year they tore up all the books in the square and burned them, and everyone was drunk and laughing. And the Festival of Science a month ago, when they dragged in the last motor car and picked lots, and each lucky man who won was allowed one smash of a sledgehammer at the car. "Do I remember that, Tom? Do I remember why I got to smash the front window, you hear? My God, it made a lovely sound. Crash!" Tom could hear the glass falling in glittering heaps. "And Bill Henderson, he got to bash the engine. Oh, he did a smart job of it with great efficiency. Wham!" "But best of all," recalled Grigsby, "there was the time they smashed a factory that was still trying to turn out airplanes." "Lord, did we feel good blowing it up," said Grigsby. "And then we found that newspaper plant and the munitions depot and exploded them together. Do you understand, Tom?" Tom puzzled over it. "I guess." It was high noon. Now the odors of the ruined city stank on the hot air, and things crawled among the tumbled buildings. "Won't it ever come back, mister?" "What, civilization? Nobody wants it. Not me." "I could stand a bit of it," said the man behind another man. "There were a few spots of beauty in it." "Don't worry your heads," shouted Grigsby. "There's no room for that either." "Ah," said the man behind the man. Someone will come along some day with imagination and patch it up. Mark my words, someone with a heart." "No," said Grigsby. "I say yes. Someone with a soul for pretty things. Might give us back a kind of limited sort of civilization, the kind we could live in peace. First thing you know, there's war. But maybe next time it'd be different." At last they stood in the main square. A man on horseback was riding from the distance into the town. He had a piece of paper in his hand. In the center of the square was the roped-off area. Tom, Grigsby, and the others were collecting their spittle and moving forward, prepared and ready, eyes wide. Tom felt his heart beating very strongly and excitedly, and the earth was hot under his bare feet. "Here we go, Tom. Let fly." 4 policemen stood at the corners of the roped area, 4 men with bits of yellow twine on their wrists to show their authority over other men. They were there to prevent rocks being hurled. "This way," said Grigsby at the last moment. "Everyone feels he's had his chance at her. You see, Tom? Go on now." Tom stood before the painting and looked at it for a long time. "Tom, spit!" His mouth was dry. "Get on, Tom. Move." "But," said Tom slowly, "she's beautiful." "Here, I'll spit for you." Grigsby spat, and the missile flew in the sunlight. The woman in the portrait smiled serenely, secretly at Tom, and he looked back at her, his heart beating, a kind of music in his ears. "She's beautiful," he said. "Now get on, before the police. Attention!" The line fell silent. One moment they were berating Tom for not moving forward. Now they were turning to the man on horseback. "What do they call it, sir?" asked Tom quietly. "The picture? Mona Lisa, Tom, I think. Yes, the Mona Lisa." "I have an announcement," said the man on horseback. "The authorities have decreed that as of high noon today, the portrait in the square is to be given over into the hands of the populace there, so they may participate in the destruction of—" Tom hadn't even time to scream before the crowd bore him, shouting and pummeling about, stampeding toward the portrait. There was a sharp, ripping sound. The police ran to escape. The crowd was in full cry, their hands like so many hungry birds, pecking away at the portrait. Tom felt himself thrust almost through the broken thing. Reaching out in blind imitation of the others, he snatched a scrap of oily canvas, yanked, felt the canvas give, then fell, was kicked, sent rolling to the outer rim of the mob. Bloody, his clothing torn, he watched old women chew pieces of canvas, men break the frame, kick the ragged cloth, and rip it into confetti. Only Tom stood apart, silent in the moving square. He looked down at his hand. It clutched the piece of canvas close to his chest, hidden. "Hey there, Tom!" cried Grigsby. Without a word, sobbing, Tom ran. He ran out and down the bomb-pitted road, into a field, across a shallow stream, not looking back, his hand clenched tightly, tucked under his coat. At sunset he reached the small village and passed on through. By 9 o'clock he came to the ruined farm dwelling. Around back in the half-silo, in the part that still remained upright, tented over, he heard the sounds of sleeping, the family, his mother, father, and brother. He slipped quickly, silently through the small door and lay down, panting. "Tom?" called his mother in the dark. "Yes." "Where have you been?" snapped his father. "I'll beat you in the morning." Someone kicked him, his brother, who had been left behind to work their little patch of ground. "Go to sleep," cried his mother faintly. Another kick. Tom lay getting his breath. All was quiet. His hand was pushed to his chest, tight, tight. He lay for half an hour this way, eyes closed. Then he felt something, and it was a cold white light. The moon rose very high, and the little square of light moved in the silo and crept slowly over Tom's body. Then, and only then, did his hand relax. Slowly, carefully, listening to those who slept about him, Tom drew his hand forth. He hesitated, sucked in his breath, and then, waiting, opened his hand and uncrumpled the tiny fragment of painted canvas. All the world was asleep in the moonlight, and there on his hand was the smile. He looked at it in the white illumination from the midnight sky, and he thought over and over to himself quietly, the smile, the lovely smile. An hour later he could still see it, even after he had folded it carefully and hidden it. He shut his eyes, and the smile was there in the darkness. It was still there, warm and gentle, when he went to sleep, and the world was silent. and the moon sailed up and then down the cold sky toward morning. The Foghorn is a fascinating story to me because of its genesis. I lived in Venice, California for about 10 years, and I was walking along the beach one night with my wife and came upon the ruins of the old Venice Pier, the great roller coaster lying there in the sand with the wind blowing around it and covering it with water. And I looked at the bones of the great roller coaster, and I turned to my wife and I said, "I wonder what that dinosaur is doing lying here in the sand." My wife pretended not to hear, and we walked on. 3 nights later, I sat up in bed in the middle of the night. There was fog outside the window. And far out in the Santa Monica Bay, I heard this great foghorn blowing over and over and over again. I said, "Oh, yes, of course, that's it. And I got up, and I went, and I wrote the Foghorn about this dinosaur and about this lighthouse. So the genesis was in a very real encounter with a roller coaster, and the sand, and the night, and the fog. And here's the story. Out there in the cold water, far from land, we waited every night for the coming of the fog, and it came. And we oiled the brass machinery and lit the fog light up in the stone tower. Feeling like 2 birds in the gray sky, McDunn and I sent the light touching out red, then white, then red again, to eye the lonely ships. And if they did not see our light, then there was always our voice, the great deep cry of our foghorn, shuddering through the rags of mist to startle the gulls away, like decks of scattered cards, and make the waves turn high and foam. "It's a lonely life, but you're used to it now, aren't you?" asked McDunn. "Yes," I said. "You're a good talker, thank the Lord." "Well, it's your turn on land tomorrow," he said, smiling, "to dance the ladies and drink gin. What do you think, McDunn, when I leave you out here alone?" "On the mysteries of the sea." McDunn lit his pipe. It was 7:15 of a cold November evening, the heat on, the light switching its tail in 200 directions, the foghorn bumbling in the high throat of the tower. There wasn't a town for 100 miles down the coast, just a road which came lonely through dead country to the sea, with few cars on it, a stretch of 2 miles of cold water out to our rock, and rare few ships. "The mysteries of the sea," said McDunn thoughtfully. "You know, the ocean's the biggest damn snowflake ever. It rolls and swells 1,000 shapes and colors, no two alike. Strange. One night, years ago, I was here alone, when all of the fish of the sea surfaced out there. Something made them swim in and lie in the bay, sort of trembling and staring up at the tower light, going red, white, across them, so I could see their funny eyes. I turned cold. They were like a great peacock's tail, moving out there until midnight. Then, without so much as a sound, they slipped away. The 1,000,000 of them were gone. I kind of think maybe in some sort of way they came all those miles to worship. Strange. But think how the tower must look to them, standing 70 feet above the water, the god light flashing out from it, and the tower declaring itself with a monster voice. They never came back, those fish. But don't you think for a while they thought they were in the presence? I shivered. I looked out at the long gray lawn of the sea, stretching away into nothing and nowhere. Oh, the sea's full. McDunn puffed his pipe nervously, blinking. He'd been nervous all day and hadn't said why. For all our engines and so-called submarines, it'll be 10,000 centuries before we set foot on the real bottom of the sunken lands, in the fairy kingdoms there, and know real terror. Think of it, it's still the year 300,000 before Christ down under there. While we've paraded around with trumpets, lopping off each other's countries and heads, They have been living beneath the sea 12 miles deep and cold in a time as old as the beard of a comet. Yes, it's an old world. Come on. I got something special I've been saving up to tell you. We ascended the 80 steps, talking and taking our time. At the top, McDunn switched off the room lights so there'd be no reflection in the plate glass. The great eye of the light was humming, turning easily in its oiled socket. The foghorn was blowing steadily, once every 15 seconds. Sounds like an animal, don't it? McDunn nodded to himself. A big, lonely animal crying in the night, sitting here on the edge of 10 billion years, calling out to the deeps. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And the deeps do answer. Yes, they do. You've been here now for 3 months, Johnny, so I better prepare you. About this time of year, he said, studying the murk and fog, something comes to visit the lighthouse. The swarms of fish, like you said? No, this is something else. I've put off telling you because you might think I'm daft, but tonight's the latest I can put it off, for if my calendar's marked right from last year, tonight's the night it comes. I won't go into detail. You'll have to see it yourself. Just sit down there. If you want, tomorrow you can pack your duffel and take the motorboat into land and get your car parked there at the dinghy pier on the Cape and drive on back to some little inland town and keep your lights burning nights. I won't question or blame you. It's happened 3 years now, and this is the only time anyone's been here with me to verify it. You wait and watch. Half an hour passed, with only a few whispers between us. When we grew tired waiting, McDunn began describing some of his ideas to me. He had some theories about the foghorn itself. One day, many years ago, a man walked along and stood in the sound of the ocean on a cold, sunless shore and said, "We need a voice to call across the waters, to warn ships. I'll make one. I'll make a voice like all of time and all of the fog that ever was. I'll make a voice that is like an empty bed beside you all night long, and like an empty house when you open the door, and like trees in autumn with no leaves. A sound like the birds flying south, crying, and a sound like November wind, and the sea on the hard, cold shore. I'll make a sound that's so alone that no one can miss it, that whoever hears it will weep in their souls, and hearts will seem warmer, and being inside will seem better to all who hear it in the distant towns. I'll make me a sound and an apparatus, and they'll call it a foghorn, and whoever hears it will know the sadness of eternity and the briefness of life." The foghorn blew. "I made up that story," said McDunn quietly, "to try to explain why this thing keeps coming back to the lighthouse every year. The foghorn calls it, I think, and it comes." "But," I said, "Shh," said McDunn, "there." He nodded out to the deeps. Something was swimming toward the lighthouse tower. It was a cold night, as I have said. The high tower was cold, the light coming and going, and the foghorn calling and calling through the raveling mist. You couldn't see far, and you couldn't see plain, but there was the deep sea moving on its way about the night earth, flat and quiet, the color of gray mud. And here were the two of us, alone in the high tower, and there, far out at first, was a ripple, followed by a wave, a rising, a bubble, a bit of froth. And then from the surface of the cold sea came a head, a large head, dark-colored, with immense eyes, and then a neck. And then not a body, but more neck and more. The head rose a full 40 feet above the water on a slender and beautiful dark neck. Only then did the body, like a little island of black coral and shells and crayfish, drip up from the subterranean. There was a flicker of tail. In all, from head to tip of tail, I estimated the monster at 90 or 100 feet. I don't know what I said. I said something. "Steady, boy, steady," whispered McDunn. "It's impossible," I said. "No, Johnny, we're impossible. It's like it was 10 million years ago. It hasn't changed. It's us and the land that have changed, become impossible. Us!" It swam slowly and with a great dark majesty out in the icy waters far away, The fog came and went about it, momentarily erasing its shape. One of its monster eyes caught and held and flashed back her immense light, red, white, like a disk held high and sending a message in primeval code. It was as silent as the fog through which it swam. "It's a dinosaur of some sort." I crouched down, holding to the stair rail. "Yes, one of the tribe. But they died out." "No, only hid away in the deeps. Deep, deep down in the deepest deeps." Isn't that a word now, Johnny? A real word. It says so much, the deeps. There's all the coldness and darkness and deepness in a word like that. What do we do? We got our job, we can't leave. Besides, we're safer here than in any boat trying to get to land. That thing's as big as a destroyer and almost as swift. But here, why does it come here? The next moment, I had my answer. The foghorn blew, and the monster answered. A cry came across a million years of water and mist, a cry so anguished and alone that it shuddered in my head and my body. The monster cried out at the tower, the foghorn blew. The monster roared again, the foghorn blew. The monster opened its great toothed mouth, and the sound that came from it was the sound of the foghorn itself, lonely and vast and far away. The sound of isolation, a viewless sea, a cold night, apartness. And that was the sound. "Now," whispered McDunn, "do you know why it comes here?" I nodded. "All year long, Johnny, that poor monster there, lying far out, 1,000 miles at sea, and 20 miles deep maybe, biding its time. Perhaps it's 1,000,000 years old, this one creature. Think of it, waiting 1,000,000 years. Could you wait that long? Maybe it's the last of its kind. I sort of think that's true. Anyway, here comes men on land and build this lighthouse 5 years ago and set up their foghorn and sound it out toward the place where you bury yourself in sleep and see memories of a world where there were thousands like yourself, but now you're alone, all alone in a world not made for you, a world where you have to hide. But the sound of the foghorn comes and goes, and you stir from the muddy bottoms of the deeps, and your eyes open like the lenses of 2-foot cameras, and you move slow, for you have the ocean sea on your shoulders, heavy. But that foghorn comes through 1,000 miles of water, faint and familiar, and the furnace in your belly stokes up, and you begin to rise, slow. You feed yourself on great slakes of cod and minnow, on rivers of jellyfish, and you rise slow through the autumn months, through September, when the fog started, through October, with more fog and the horn still calling you on, and then late in November, after pressurizing yourself day by day, a few feet higher every hour, you are near the surface and still alive. You've got to go slow. If you surfaced all at once, you'd explode. So it takes you all of 3 months to surface, and then a number of days to swim through the cold waters to the lighthouse. And there you are out there in the night, Johnny, the biggest damn monster in creation. And here's the lighthouse calling to you with a long neck like your neck sticking way up out of the water, and a body like your body, and most important of all, a voice like your voice. Do you understand now, Johnny? Do you understand? The foghorn blew. The monster answered. I saw it all. I knew it all. 1,000,000 years of waiting alone for someone to come back who never came back. The 1,000,000 years of isolation at the bottom of the sea. The insanity of time there, while the skies cleared of reptile birds, the swamps dried on the continental lands, the sloths and saber-tooths had their day and sank in tar pits, and men ran like white ants upon the hills. The foghorn blew. "Last year," said McDunn, "that creature swam round and round all night, not coming too near, puzzled, I'd say, afraid maybe, and a bit angry after coming all this way. But the next day, unexpectedly, the fog lifted, the sun came out fresh, the sky was as blue as a painting, and the monster swam off away from the heat and the silence and didn't come back. I suppose it's been brooding on it for a year now, thinking it over from every which way. The monster was only 100 yards off now, it and the foghorn crying at each other. As the lights hit them, the monster's eyes were fire and ice. That's life for you," said McDunn. "Someone always waiting for someone who never comes home. Always someone loving something more than that thing loves them. And after a while, you want to destroy whatever that thing is, so it can't hurt you no more. The monster was rushing at the lighthouse. The foghorn blew. "Let's see what happens," said McDunn. He switched the foghorn off. The ensuing minute of silence was so intense that we could hear our hearts pounding in the glassed area of the tower, could hear the slow greased turn of the light. The monster stopped and froze. Its great lantern eyes blinked. Its mouth gaped. It gave a sort of rumble like a volcano. It twitched its head this way and that, as if to seek the sounds now dwindled off into the fog. It peered at the lighthouse. It rumbled again. Then its eyes caught fire. It reared up, threshed the water, and rushed at the tower, its eyes filled with angry torment. "McDunn!" I cried. "Switch on the horn!" McDunn fumbled with the switch, but even as he flicked it on, the monster was rearing up. I had a glimpse of its gigantic paws, fish skin glittering in webs between the finger-like projections clawing at the tower. The huge eye on the right side of its anguished head glittered before me like a cauldron into which I might drop screaming. The tower shook. The foghorn cried. The monster cried. It seized the tower and gnashed at the glass, which shattered in upon us. McDunn seized my arm. "Downstairs!" The tower rocked, trembled, and started to give. The foghorn and the monster roared. We stumbled and half fell down the stairs. "Quick!" We reached the bottom as the tower buckled down upon us. We ducked under the stairs into the small stone cellar. There were 1,000 concussions. As the rocks rained down, the foghorn stopped abruptly. The monster crashed upon the tower. The tower fell. We knelt together, McDunn and I, holding tight, while our world exploded. Then it was over, and there was nothing but darkness and the wash of the sea on the raw stones. That and the other sound. "Oh, listen," said McDunn quietly. "Listen." We waited a moment, and then I began to hear it. First a great vacuumed sucking of air, and then the lament, the bewilderment, the loneliness of the great monster folded over and upon us, above us, so that the sickening reek of its body filled the air, a stone's thickness away from our cellar. The monster gasped and cried. The tower was gone. The light was gone. The thing that had called to it across 1,000,000 years was gone. And the monster was opening its mouth and sending out great sounds, the sounds of a foghorn, again and again. And the ships far at sea, not finding the light, not seeing anything, but passing and hearing late that night, must have thought, "There it is, the lonely sound, the lonesome bay horn. All's well, we've rounded the cape." And so it went for the rest of that night. The sun was hot and yellow the next afternoon when the rescuers came out to dig us from our stoned undercellar. "It fell apart is all," said McDunn gravely. "We had a few bad knocks from the waves, and it just crumbled." He pinched my arm. There was nothing to see. The ocean was calm, the sky blue. The only thing was a great algaic stink from the green matter that covered the fallen tower stones and the shore rocks. Flies buzzed about. The ocean washed empty on the shore. The next year they built a new lighthouse, but by that time I had a job in the little town and a wife and a good, small, warm house that glowed yellow on autumn nights, the doors locked, the chimney puffing smoke. As for McDunn, he was master of the new lighthouse, built to his own specifications out of steel-reinforced concrete. "Just in case," he said. The new lighthouse was ready in November. I drove down alone one evening late and parked my car and looked across the gray waters and listened to the new horn sounding once, twice, 3, 4 times a minute far out there by itself. The monster, it never came back. "It's gone away," said McDunn. It's gone back to the deeps. It's learned you can't love anything too much in this world. It's gone into the deepest deeps to wait another 1,000,000 years. The poor thing, waiting out there and waiting out there, while man comes and goes on this pitiful little planet, waiting and waiting. I sat in my car listening. I couldn't see the lighthouse or the light standing out in Lonesome Bay. I could only hear the horn. The horn. The horn. It sounded like the monster calling. I sat there, wishing there was something I could say.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy what I'm doing, I ask you to please subscribe to my channel or channels. Well, hope you enjoyed, and until next time, stay safe, wish you well, peace.